I was 2 weeks away from saying I do when my dad called to say he wouldn't be there to walk me down the aisle because my sister had scheduled a party and needed him more. I didn't beg. I didn't reschedule. I just looked for someone who actually showed up for me. And when my father found out who took his place, the look on his face made the whole room go silent. Before I dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. And if family drama has ever crashed your big moments, tap like and subscribe because this story might make your relatives look like saints. My name is Lena. I'm 29, a strategist at a creative agency, and I grew up on Birch Street in a quiet Ohio town called Cedar Ridge, a place where everyone waved from porches and knew the first and last name of your dog. Our house was a narrow, bright blue two-story with a slanted porch, wind chimes, and my mother's herb boxes overflowing with basil and mint every summer. It smelled like lilacs in April and cinnamon in December. From the sidewalk, we looked like peace and togetherness. When I was little, my dad, Douglas Gray, was the sun my world revolved around. He managed a branch at Riverway Bank, which to 6-year-old me sounded like he kept all the money for everyone and handed it out as needed. He wore pressed shirts, carried a dark leather briefcase, and had silver at his temples years before any of my friends' dads did. In the mornings, he'd sit on the edge of the counter, tapping a spoon against his coffee mug, and quiz me on spelling words while my mom tucked a note into my lunchbox. "You're the mind that keeps me humble, Bug," Dad liked to say. "You'll outrun us all one day." Mom, Maris, was our anchor. She was a nurse who smelled faintly of lavender lotion and worked evenings at the clinic on Maple Avenue. She taught me how to braid my hair, how to roll sugar cookies without tearing the dough, and how to be gentle with myself on bad days. She kept the house together with lists on the fridge and a humming laugh that made even grocery runs feel like field trips. Whenever Dad's job got tense, she was the softness to his sharp corners. Then life learned how to take. I was 12 when Mom's fatigue stopped being a long week and turned into appointments, tests, words whispered down hallways. She was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive cancer that moved faster than any of us could comprehend. 6 months later, she was gone. A casserole line of neighbors cycled through our kitchen. The lilacs bloomed and nobody noticed. Our wind chimes sounded like someone shaking bones. Grief turned our house into a museum version of itself, clean, quiet, and off-limits. Dad stayed later at the bank, and when he did come home, he'd retreat to his office, door half closed, claiming reports and deadlines as shields. He didn't stop loving us. He just didn't know how to be around us without breaking. That was when my sister, Delilah, stepped into the empty space and started arranging the furniture of our lives to suit herself. Delilah is 3 years older, tall, athletic, with that posture that makes you think she was born to lead a parade. In middle school, she ran track, and in high school, she lived in a rotation of glossy ponytails and leather jackets. She and I were never enemies growing up, but we weren't companions either. We were different species. She loved the boom of a crowd. I loved the quiet thrum of a sketchbook. Even before Mom got sick, Delilah bristled at the easy way Dad and I talked, our shared love for books, for lingering in the garage glue-gunning cardboard cities for my school projects while a radio murmured in the corner. After Mom died, Delilah became the self-appointed lady of the house at 15. She set dinner times and reminded Dad to sign permission slips some I'd already asked him to, some I hadn't. It looked like helpfulness. It felt like colonization. "You can't smother him with needs, Lena," she told me one night while we were loading the dishwasher. "The man's holding this family together. Try not to make everything harder." I learned later that not making everything harder translated to, don't expect Dad to show up to things if those things didn't orbit Delilah. When my 8th grade band had their last concert of the year, I put programs by the front door for Dad. Delilah accidentally recycled them while doing a heroic clean-out of the hallway. When I joined the community art show as a freshman, she told Dad I decided it wasn't a big deal and preferred to go alone. When I asked Dad to take Saturday morning to help me pick out a camera for a school project, Delilah reminded him about an imaginary bank meeting and then took him to look at cars she couldn't afford. "You can't fight sabotage you can't see." By sophomore year of high school, I'd stopped asking my father for much of anything. The worst was junior year. I'd been nominated for a statewide art scholarship, something I poured myself into, staying up late painting until my room smelled like oils and oranges. The awards ceremony was on a Thursday at the auditorium, and I circled the date on the calendar in 4 colors. I asked Dad to come every week for a month. The night before, I overheard Delilah in the hallway, phone pressed to her ear, saying, "She'll be mortified if you're there. Dad, you know Lena. She wants low-key. Maybe send a card so she knows you're proud." I accepted my award under stage lights while other kids posed with parents. I took a picture in the women's bathroom mirror holding the certificate like a passport I couldn't get stamped. When I got home, there was a gift card from Dad propped against a sticky note. "Proud of you. Big client dinner. Celebrate this weekend." In the morning, I learned there had been no dinner. I graduated from Cedar Ridge High and ran like girls do when their lungs finally remember how to breathe. Lakeview University, 2 hours away. A dorm room that smelled like popcorn and detergent. I majored in communications and studio art and learned I could make a living telling stories that helped good things get seen. I learned to cook rice without sticking it to the pot. I learned that loneliness wasn't a personality trait, it was a condition you could treat. During my sophomore year, I met the boy who would become the man who became my husband. His name is Colin Harper. We sat next to each other in an elective class called Metaphors and Machines. He asked to borrow my notes after missing a lecture with the flu. I made a joke about his miserable handwriting when he gave them back. He smiled like someone opening a window. Coffee turned into study sessions. Study sessions turned into, "Want to see the weird museum downtown?" And one day I realized we had 3 favorite restaurants and a shared Google Calendar. Where my family at home was a quiet wilderness, Colin's was this warm, unruly garden you could get lost in. His mother, Ruth, is an elementary school librarian who makes brownies for people having bad weeks and has a way of asking questions that feel like open doors. His dad, Graham, is a civil engineer with a gentle sarcasm and a habit of fixing things no one else noticed were broken. And then there's Theo, Graham's brother by marriage. Everyone calls him Uncle Theo. He's in his early 60s with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a historian's way of listening like your words are artifacts that matter. He taught for years at a small college, never married, and treats Colin and his little brother like his own grand experiment in kindness. The first time I ate Sunday dinner at the Harper's house, Ruth pressed leftovers into my hands as if I'd told her I was going to cross a desert. Theo asked me about the book in my tote bag and actually knew the author's other work. After dessert, Graham insisted I take his sweatshirt because the evening had cooled. I'd never known love could be so casual. So daily. Colin and I moved to Columbus after graduation. He signed on at a consultancy. I got a junior role at a creative firm and started climbing. We rented a small apartment above a bookstore where the windows were drafty, but the light was perfect in the afternoon. I kept my monthly, "How are you?" phone calls with my father. They were like weather reports. Fine. Busy. Yes, Delilah's doing great. You. The space between my dad and me calcified and turned into a kind of careful truce. Then, 5 years into loving each other, on a Wednesday masquerading as a Saturday, Colin proposed. He made an ordinary day feel like trilogies. We had breakfast at the diner where we crammed for finals once, went to the art museum where I made him stand far too long in front of a piece that looked like rain if rain could think, then wandered down the river talking about all the small things that add up to a life. At dinner, a tiny velvet box appeared next to my creme brulee. Inside was an emerald ring in a simple gold setting. Not flashy, intentional. Green like a promise. "You make me brave," Colin said, which is still the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me. "Will you marry me?" I did, right there at the little table, crying into my napkin while Ruth and Graham texted us celebratory gifts from around the corner where they'd been hiding to surprise us. Telling my father felt like knocking on a door I wasn't sure anyone would open. I called that night. "Dad," I said when he picked up, "Colin asked me to marry him." There was a pause, not long, but long enough. "Well," he said, as if I'd told him rain was likely tomorrow. "Congratulations. He seems like a solid guy." Have you thought about when? No, tell me how he asked. No, how do you feel, Bug? I told myself it was fine. He's awkward with emotions, I thought. He loves you his way, I thought. I told him we were thinking summer. He said to send details once we had them. I'll check my calendar. We set the date 8 months out, a Saturday in June at the Franklin Arboretum, the garden with the stone bridge and the big maple that looks like something out of a children's book. The ceremony would be outside, the reception in the glass house with lights strung like constellations. My dad said the date was clear. I took a breath and asked the question I'd been rehearsing. I'd like you to walk me down the aisle, I said. Quiet. Then I'd be honored, in a voice that sounded old and soft. I cried when we hung up and saved the voicemail like a child saving a rare shell. Planning a wedding is part spreadsheets, part fairy dust, part group therapy. Ruth came dressed shopping and cried at everything because she's Ruth. Graham tasted cake like it was a serious moral undertaking. Colin's little brother lobbied for a taco bar. Theo asked thoughtful questions about the ceremony readings, listened to my ideas like a professor listening to a dissertation, and sent a poem that made me want to rewrite my vows from scratch. Delilah, when asked to be a bridesmaid, texted a long apology about quarter-end deadlines and the explosion of her real estate career. I'll definitely be there, she wrote. Just can't do the dress thing. Fine. And then, 3 months before our wedding, Delilah called with a tone she uses when pretending generosity. Little Lena, she sang, a name I hate. I wanted you to hear it from me. The firm's throwing me a career celebration. I hit my numbers to qualify for senior broker. It's going to be a total blowout at the Crestview Country Club. Congratulations, I said. When? A beat. June 15th. Our wedding is June 15th. Oh, she said, like the thought had just fallen out of the ceiling and hit her. Right. But it's midday. 11 a.m. We'll be done long before for a clock thing. Our venue sat a good 90 minutes from Crestview without traffic. She knew that. She wanted me to do the mental math about dresses and photographs and fathers who needed to be early. I hung up, took a walk around the block, and called my dad. You knew, I said, forcing my voice to be flat. About Delilah's party. She mentioned it, he said lightly. It's UNF, unfortunate, the overlap, but these events are hard to shift. It's a milestone for her. How will you do both? I'll go to the beginning of hers and then head over. If we push your ceremony a bit, that would make it simple. We had already contracted with the Arboretum, the quartet, the caterer, the photographer, and a dozen other professionals who did not exist in a world where you shift a ceremony time like you shove a chair. Dad, I said, pulling in all the air I could. I need you there. For the aisle. For the photos. He made that managerial sound half sigh, half schedule. We'll make it work. What followed felt like death by 1,000 logistics. Over the next couple of weeks, my father floated small grenades in every call. Could I skip pre-ceremony photos? Could I do a first look after so he could come later? Was the quartet flexible? Was the officiant flexible? Was I flexible? 2 weeks before the wedding, he stopped pretending. Lena, he said on a Tuesday night while I was scribbling names on a seating chart at the kitchen table, I've thought this through a dozen ways. I can't make the timing work if I'm going to do right by your sister and be present for her event. I'll come to your reception. 7:30, depending on traffic. But the ceremony. I can't be there. The way he said it, like I was a logistical inconvenience, took my breath out of my body. I set my pen down and stared at the placemat because if I looked at the wall, I would scream loud enough to wake filling departments in other cities. You're choosing not to walk me down the aisle, I said, and I was proud of how even my voice sounded. It's not about choosing, he said. It's about practical reality. Someone else can do that part. Colin's father, maybe. Someone else. Like we were swapping prosecutors in a minor county case. I am not proud of the next hour of my life. I cried like a child who broke too late for the corner of the table. Colin came home to find me on the kitchen floor with a napkin stuck to my hands and the cat sitting an inch away from my knee like a small, furry therapist. He's not coming, I told him. Colin sat and pulled me into his lap and let me ruin his shirt. That night, he asked gently if I wanted to move the date. We can do it, he said. I'll call the Arboretum. We'll take the hit and we'll rebook. It'll be okay. But something in me burned too hot to bend. I could feel Delilah's smile from here. No, I said. We're not making our marriage small because my sister refuses to be. I'm done collapsing for her. The next day, Ruth called to ask about table linens and, like mothers do, heard all the words I wasn't saying. I told her everything. There was a silence on the line that felt like hands cupping my face. Listen to me, sweetheart, she said finally. You do not shrink for this. You do not apologize for this. Your father made a choice. It's a terrible one. But your wedding is still your wedding. We'll make it beautiful. And the person who walks you down that aisle will be the person who has walked with you in the ways that matter. That phrase sat with me all day. The person who has walked with you. 2 days later, Theo called. Ruth, let me know what's happened, he said in that steady voice of his. I'm sorry, Lena. Parental failures leave. Echoes. You sound like you know, I said. He was quiet a moment. My father and I parted ways when I was 22, he said finally. He wanted a son who played golf with clients. He got a son who read poems under trees. He skipped my graduation. He didn't come when I defended my thesis. When Ruth married Graham, her own father refused to attend. Second marriage to him was a scandal. I stood up and walked her down the aisle. It was one of the honors of my life. The thought arrived in me fully formed, like a ship gliding into harbor. Theo, I said, my throat tight, would you be willing to walk you? He said softly. Yes, if you want me to. Only if it would bring you comfort and not pain. Comfort, I said. It would bring me comfort. I didn't realize how much I'd been bracing until I heard myself breathe. The week before the wedding was a frenzy of gift bags and nail appointments and emails with subject lines like final head count and question badge option. I called my father 3 days out to confirm he was still coming to the reception. I should be there by 8, he said, the should thudding like a bad word. Save me some cake. I told him I'd asked Theo to walk me. There was a pause. I suppose someone has to, he said. And then, see you Saturday. The night before the wedding, after the rehearsal dinner, we went back to the hotel with friends, buzzing on laughter and wine and the big stack of place cards that still needed sorting. While the others argued about whether we had enough votives, I checked social media, because I am a raccoon attracted to shiny things even in crisis. Delilah had been posting sneak peeks of her broker gala all week, cryptic captions, too much gold confetti. That night, she posted a boomerang of a banner hung crooked over her kitchen island that said cheers and a table of Costco cupcakes. There were maybe 12 people in the background, 2 wearing gym t-shirts. Someone's tag revealed they worked at a Pilates studio. The event venue was her apartment. A coworker commented, "Wait, broker promotion? When did this happen?" Delilah replied with a winking face. I stared at my phone until the words blurred into squares. It wasn't a company party. It wasn't even a career celebration. It was a house party, scheduled to sit on top of my wedding like a bully sitting on a chest. The morning of the wedding, the sun did me the favor of being generous. Ruth showed up with pastries and a portable steamer. My 3 bridesmaids turned our hotel suite into a salon and then into a confessional, the way women do, swapping stories and mascara wands. I kept waiting for grief to crack me open. It didn't. I felt clear, almost defiant. This day was not going to be colonized by anyone else's hunger. At noon, there was a knock at the door. Theo stood there in his tux, holding a small box with the careful reverence of a scholar handling a fragile book. I won't stay, he said, stepping in. I just wanted to bring you something. Inside the box lay a vintage handkerchief edged with the kind of lace you only see in old photographs and estate sales, delicately embroidered with tiny forget-me-nots. My mother carried it on her wedding day in 1958, Theo said. It's the only heirloom I could never place anywhere. I think it belongs with you for today. I cried. Again. Something old, he added, smile tilting and very blue. He also handed me a little velvet pouch from Ruth. Inside was a slim silver bracelet with a single charm, a paintbrush crossed with a fountain pen. Ruth said you are the only person she knows who can write copy that makes clients cry and also draw a bird that looks like it could fly off the page, Theo said, eyes kind. She wanted you to have a reminder. Sometimes you don't realize how starved you've been for uncomplicated care until someone sets a bowl of it down in front of you and tells you to eat. We drove to the Arboretum in 2 cars. I watched through the window as the lawn filled with the people who built me, a few college friends who'd held my hand while I learned how to use a drill, 2 coworkers who'd snuck me out for tacos the day I found out my campaign had been credited to someone else, neighbors who once taught me how to ride a bike without training wheels. The quartet tuned. The glass house threw sunlight back into the trees. 10 minutes before 4, I met Theo in the little anteroom by the terrace. He looked older in that lovely, dignified way that silver hair buys you, and held himself very straight, as if someone had fitted courage into his spine. "Ready?" he asked. "More than I expected," I said. He offered his arm. I took it. We stepped into the light. People have told me since that the moment we came through the doors was cinematic. I haven't watched the video. I don't need to. What I remember: the sound of chair legs scooting as people stood, the music like a hand under my ribs, the way Colin looked at me like he was seeing our entire future in one frame. Theo walked with deliberate steadiness, not a ceremonial march, but the pace of someone who keeps time with you and not with any grand idea about how things should appear. We reached the front. Theo placed my hand in Colin's and kissed my cheek, and so much love moved through me at once that it felt like standing under a waterfall. We wrote our own vows because I wanted to build our marriage out of words we'd have to come back to when we were tired. We promised to laugh at small irritations, to ask for what we needed, to choose kindness when we were hungry. We promised to be on the same side of the table when life pushed a problem across it. The officiant announced us. People clapped the way people clap when they mean it. Confetti cannons did not go off. It didn't matter. It felt like the first day of the best kind of work. Cocktail hour blurred into dinner. Graham gave a toast about how marriage is engineering for the heart, loads and stresses, and building something that flexes without breaking. Ruth cried, obviously. One of my friends told a story about the time I lost my voice at a pitch and still landed the account with a whiteboard and a fierce stare. Theo stood with his glass and said, "Family is not just the names on your birth certificate. It is the people who hold the rope when you're crossing a shaky bridge." The glass house glowed. The dance floor filled. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt free of wanting anything from my father that he didn't think to give. Around 8:30, my cousin Evan slipped in late, slightly sweaty, I ask you. Evan is my mom's sister's son, a decent human who manages to like people I cannot, and who has a loyalty that doesn't tip into foolishness. "I'm so sorry," he said, hugging me. "I thought I could make both. I went by Delilah's thing first." He made a face. "Lena, it wasn't. It wasn't what she said it was." I raised an eyebrow. "I know," I said quietly, remembering the banner. There were 12 people. Her coworker, Talia, no idea about any promotion. She called it a manifesting mixer. He shook his head. "She told Uncle Doug you didn't really want him here. That having him walk you would be awkward for you, and you were asking out of duty. She said you were playing nice." "She told me he didn't care," I said. Then I told him about the party times, the calls, the ask to push the ceremony. Evan looked angry in that rare quiet way people look when they've reached the end of their own excuses for someone. "Do you want me to show him?" he asked, pulling out his phone. "I have the texts. She wrote to me weeks ago saying she scheduled it on purpose to make him pick." I stared at the lights reflecting off the glass, then at the room we'd made. "Not now," I said. "This is mine." We danced some more. At 10:30, the doors opened and my father walked in like a man arriving late to a dentist appointment. He had that slightly rumpled, I changed in a parking lot look. He glanced around as if he was at a museum exhibit titled Weddings, a retrospective, and had wandered into the 2010s room by accident. He hugged me the way you hug a neighbor you see at the hardware store. "Congratulations," he said. "Beautiful setup." Then he handed me a gift bag with the name of a department store on the front like an apology sticker. "Vanessa's went long," he added, as if that sentence explained the past decade. "Thanks for coming," I said, because I couldn't think of anything else that wouldn't light the building on fire. We walked to the bar. He ordered a scotch. He peered over the rim of his glass and asked, "So, who walked you?" "Colin's uncle," I said. "Theo. That older gentleman in the navy tux?" The one who gave that speech. He frowned. You let a stranger take my place. He's not a stranger to me, I said. He's family. My father's mouth did that thin line thing it does when he's displeased in a professional way. It seems, he said carefully, you could have picked a day that didn't force the issue with your sister. Our date was set 9 months ago, Dad. He looked at me then, really looked, and I watched him prepare his own defense, the brief he'd been writing for years. Busy man, 2 children, trying his best. Before he could deliver it, Evan appeared like a witness called to the stand. Uncle Doug, he said, polite to a fault, glad you're here. He turned to me. Lena, do you want? I nodded. Evan showed my father the screenshots. Delilah's text to him, giddy and unfiltered, booked my bash on the 15th. Let's see if Dad chooses the loser or the winner. She didn't even want him there, told me so herself. I'm doing her a favor. And then, for weeks ago, he'll come to mine and she'll sulk. Predictable. Something in my father's face changed. He read the messages twice. His eyes went flat and then very bright. He put a hand to his forehead, laughed once, short and uncomfortable, like a man in a bad movie realizing the villain was inside the house. She said, he started, voice brittle, you'd be embarrassed if I stood up there with you. That you. Preferred to do it alone. I asked you because I wanted you, I said. The words felt like glass in my throat. I wanted my father. You said yes. Then you chose not to come. He looked like he'd been pushed underwater. He turned then and saw Theo across the room speaking with Ruth and Graham. He moved toward us with the energy of a man who'd remembered the thing he came to get. You're the one, he said to Theo, stopping short. You took my place. Theo took off his glasses and folded them very slowly, which I've learned is his version of squaring up. I walked Lena, he said gently after she asked me to, and after you told her you would not. She's my daughter, my father snapped. Not yours. Theo nodded, as if my father had pointed out something true but small. Being her father, he said, would have required you to be there when she asked. I know the job. I had the privilege for 4 minutes today. Don't patronize me, my father said, but the anger had drained out of it. It sounded more like a plea. He looked at me again, then at the screenshots still lit on Evan's phone, then back at Theo with a kind of hollow bewilderment. I need to go, he said. I need to talk to Delilah. Tomorrow, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. Not tonight. He hesitated, war happening behind his eyes. Tomorrow, he said finally. He looked at Theo again, held out his hand as if it weighed something. Thank you, he said. It came out like crushed gravel. Theo shook his hand. For what it's worth, he said, you have a daughter worth moving mountains for. Start small. Move a stone. My father left. The room breathed. We lit sparklers at midnight and ran through a tunnel of friends who hooped like we were famous. The car smelled like flowers and sugar and the particular relief that happens when you exit a scene you've been braced for and find yourself still whole. Colin squeezed my hand so hard my knuckles popped. Honeymoon? He asked, eyes bright. Honeymoon, I said. We went to Portugal, Lisbon's tiled buildings and custard tarts, trains that made the countryside blur into an impressionist painting. We walked along the river and pretended we were the kind of people who could become locals anywhere. We turned off our notifications and only used our phones to take pictures of sardines in shop windows and each other leaning into laughter. For the first time in months, I slept like a person without ghosts in the room. Back home, the ghosts had left voicemails. There were 5 from my father, each voice more raw than the last. I'm sorry, the first one said, like a man confessing in a booth. I was wrong, the second said, like a fist opening. I confronted her, the third said, and there was something like grief in it. She laughed. Then she cried. Then she admitted it. The 5th message undid me. I do not expect forgiveness. But if there is a world where we can sit at a table and I can hear your life without Delilah's voice in my ear, I want to try to live in that world. I will show up when you say, any time, any place. There were no messages from Delilah. Just a single email with a subject line that said away. The body read, taking some time. Don't make this bigger than it is. You always do. I went to the couch and sat with the phone like it might jump. Colin brought me tea that I didn't drink. I didn't call back immediately. I let the words work on me like slow medicine. The following weeks were a tangle of normal: thank you cards, laundry, the full inbox at work. The way the cat decided the wedding bouquet on the table was a new bed. Theo called on a Sunday, as he does, and asked not, "Have you forgiven him?" but "How's your heart?" He said something I wrote on a sticky note: "Forgiveness isn't erasing the debt. It's deciding you won't spend your life doing the collections work." A month after the wedding, I met my father at a diner halfway between Columbus and Cedar Ridge. He was early. He had a haircut. He looked suddenly older in a way that made me ache. "I don't know how to do this," he said when the coffee arrived. But I could not try. We talked for 3 hours in starts and stops like rain. He told the truth. I asked questions I had rehearsed since I was 13. He didn't defend Delilah. He didn't pretend his choices hadn't made scars. He said, "When your mother died, I chose the piece of pain I knew how to carry, work, and let your sister tell me what part of you I could have." He said, "It was easier to believe the worst of you than to feel the worst in me." He said, "I am ashamed." He said it like something you don't say if you plan to take it back. I did not hand him absolution like a mint. "I'm willing to try," I said finally. "But trying will look like showing up without being asked. It will look like hearing no. It will look like you being proud of me out loud and not just to other people. It will look like you apologizing to Colin for making him hold me while I cried on our kitchen floor." He nodded. "Okay." "Also," I said, because my therapist would have beamed, "I need boundaries. You don't get to mention Delilah when we're talking about my life. We can discuss her, but not as currency, not as an excuse. She is her own weather system. I'm not interested in forecasts." "Okay," he said again. He started showing up, not with grand gestures, with small ones, the only ones that matter. He sent recipes he thought I'd like and photos of the herb boxes he replanted. He asked for pictures of the campaign I was proudest of. He let Ruth teach him how to comment on Instagram without liking his own comment. He drove to Columbus for dinner on Tuesdays sometimes without bringing a single opinion about how we arranged our living room. He apologized to Colin in person. He apologized to Theo, to man, quietly, in the corner at Graham and Ruth's, and I watched their handshake turn into a conversation that would become an odd friendship built on books and the joy of a thrift store find. Delilah vanished to Florida for a while, or so Evan heard. She texted me on my birthday a string of emojis and nothing else. I stopped trying to alchemize those crumbs into cake. That first Thanksgiving as a married couple we hosted. Our apartment was too small, which made it perfect. Ruth brought pies. Graham took charge of the turkey with an engineer's precision that made Theo roll his eyes and then document every step like an anthropologist in the field. My father came early and mashed potatoes like it was a sacrament. We invited Evan and 2 friends who didn't have family nearby. We set out mismatched plates and lit candles because I believe in candlelight as a coping mechanism. We went around the table and said what we were grateful for because Ruth insists, and I don't mind structured sentiment. When it was my father's turn, he picked up his water glass and set it down again. "I'm grateful for a second chance I don't deserve," he said, voice catching. "And for a daughter who has a stronger spine than anyone I know." Theo smiled into his napkin. Graham made a joke about spines and load-bearing walls to keep us from crying too much. A year after the wedding, we had a small dinner to celebrate our anniversary. Theo gave a toast that made everyone reach for something to dab under their eyes. 1 year ago, he said, I had the privilege of walking Lena toward a life she was already building with both hands. I thought I was stepping into an absence. Instead, I discovered an abundance. Family chosen and stitched together, flawed and honest and trying. May your marriage continue to be a place where showing up is the first language. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 12 or 19 or even 27. Revenge doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it looks like refusing to edit yourself smaller to make room for someone else's ego. Sometimes it looks like giving your love and your big days to the people who earn them. Sometimes it looks like letting the consequences arrive on their own schedule, like your father missing your first dance and watching another man, a good man, be the one everyone remembers standing at your shoulder. I didn't scream at Delilah. I didn't crash her party. I simply let the truth be seen and kept building a life too steady to be knocked down by a person who needs constant proof the world spins around her. My father's reaction when he found out who walked me, the punch of regret, the shame, the realization that he'd stood in the wrong room for years, wasn't a triumph. It was a turning point. I won't pretend everything is perfect. It isn't. Some mornings, I still wake up mad on behalf of the girl who waited on bleachers with a program in her hand. Some nights, I grieve the mother who would have loved picking wildflowers for my bouquet and telling stories that make everyone at the rehearsal dinner lean forward. Delilah is still Delilah, built of steel and impulse, allergic to accountability. But I no longer organize my days around the weather in her head. If you're listening to this because you've got your own Delilah, your own parent who didn't come when they should have, your own moment where you were told to be understanding of other people's priorities, I hope something in this helps. You're allowed to insist on being chosen. You're allowed to hand the job of standing beside you to the person who actually stood there all along. Have you ever had someone unexpected step up when family let you down? Or been the one who stepped in? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one because I believe in the little community we're building here, people who know that love is a verb. If this story landed anywhere in you, hit like and subscribe for more messy, honest tales and the kind of endings that aren't fairy tale perfect but are, in their way, happy. And wherever you are, I hope you find your tribe, the ones who show up early, sit in the front row, and save you the best slice of cake every time.